Sega.
Sega Rally Championship.
Sega Rally Championship was Sega's follow-up to Daytona USA, and it couldn't have been more different. Based on the popular World Rally Championship, this game allowed players to race the Toyota Celica GT4 against the Lancia Delta Integrale across 3 locations and an extra bonus track to try to set the fastest time, whilst coming first at the end of the race. This is one of my favourite games ever, and it got me into rally racing games, so it's a pretty important title to me personally. First, we'll look at the original 1995 arcade version running on Sega's Model 2A CRX hardware. This I'll emulate using the Sega Model 2 emulator. Next, we'll look at the standard PC port, which released in 1997, essentially a higher resolution version of the Sega Saturn game. And finally, we'll dig into Sega Rally Direct 3D, an ultra-rare late 1997 variant that I came across and helped to bring to everyone's attention. There are quite a few hidden features in this version, so stick around and find out a lot more about it. The arcade game released in early 1995 and was available in both a single and 2-player head-to-head cabinet. All feature a force feedback steering wheel and a 4-speed gear shifter. An upright, not shown here, was also produced. Now before we get stuck into the arcade, I just want to discuss the limitations of the Sega Model 2 emulator. Here's a screenshot of the actual arcade board in action. Note how the textures on the road and building degrade into blurriness in the distance due to trilinear filtering, whilst the trees and sponsor boards are not affected by this and show a lot of pixels. Here's the Model 2 emulator using MIP mapping to try to replicate the distant blurriness of the arcade. If you use the trilinear filtering in the emulator, it looks largely the same, but some textures go missing as you play. The downside of using MIP mapping in the emulator is that the trees in the distance are now particularly soft and fuzzy, as are the sponsor logos, and dust sprayed up from the car. So I'm going to forsake the blurriness and keep the distant pixels sharp, as shown in this screenshot. This does mean my arcade footage will be a bit more gritty looking than the real arcade version, but I prefer this to elements becoming blurry that are not blurry in the arcade. The arcade begins with the logo. Note that the full name is actually Sega Rally Championship 1995. This is followed by a rolling demo of the 3 main stages in the game. You'll note that this is fairly blocky looking as the arcade runs at just 496 by 384 pixel resolution. The emulator does allow you to upscale the game to higher resolutions, but I'm sticking to how the actual arcade version really looked. The first demo shows the desert stage, which replicates the Safari Rally. This is then followed by a demo of the American-based forest stage, themed after the Yosemite National Park, and finally a demo of the mountain stage, which is styled after the Tour de Corse rally on the French island of Corsica. There's a 4th extra stage, but I'll cover that in a minute. All 3 demo stages show the top 16 drivers in the championship, which covers the time taken across the 3 main stages, but not the extra stage. Some licensing information then comes up, and these demos then loop. When you start a game, you can choose to practice any stage, or run the full championship mode. You can then choose between manual and automatic transmission cars. I'm using automatic in these videos.
3, 2, 1, go!
After a countdown, the desert stage begins. Note the distance gauge and rearview mirror at the top of the screen, which appear when driving from the bumper cam view. Neither of these appear in the PC ports. Symbols flash up on the screen as your co-driver shouts out information about the upcoming corners. Towards the end, note the animals dotted around, the big mountain range in the distance, and the close encounter with a helicopter. The camera pans around your car at the end of the stage. For the forest stage, I've decided to show the Lancia Delta instead, and this is the behind the car view. Note the small birds flying away on this turn. This stage is a bit more tricky as you plunge into a tunnel, then slide around some muddy turns. The track soon opens up though to view the entire mountain range in the distance. There's a quick run along the mountain edge, before you plunge back into the forest and complete the stage. We'll stick with the Delta for the mountain stage, which begins in a small town. You then race past an impressive castle, although it does look more like a castle from Wales or England than France. Next is a series of increasingly sharp hairpins up through the mountain. There's no handbrake in this game, and it's up to either careful use of the brake and accelerator, or shifting down a number of gears, if you use manual gears, in order to swing the car through the sharpest turns. There's another small village to clatter through.
Wow! Medium right, checkpoint! Easy left, maybe! Easy left, maybe!
Before the stage opens into a tree-lined section,
Easy left!
before dropping back into town.
Finish!
Now if you come first after all 3 stages, you gain access to the extra stage, Lakeside, which appears to be set in the UK. We're back with the Celica for this one. It's a very technical stage where every wall will slow you down. For long-term Sega fans, there's actually a Sunset Lakeside stage in Outrun that this stage slightly resembles. I have no idea if that's intentional. When you get to the lake, you might have time to spot some swans on the left, before some very tricky final turns. Here, I just run out of time. As I finish the other 3 stages, but not Lakeside, I get the alternative credits scene, set to relaxing views of the Lakeside stage. Look, there are those swans again. I then get to put my name into the high score table, with this iconic letter select screen. I just missed out to poo. And then it's time for the even more iconic... The arcade version does have a little cheat. If you hold the brake and shift through all 4 gears on the car select screen, it will make this little noise. And your car will then perform better in the game. This was the only way I managed to finish the arcade version when I was playing it back in my student union building at university. Ultimately, if you finish Lakeside first, then you'll get this animation. And then the alternative credits sequence, where you watch clips from your run through all 4 stages. After this, it's the name entry, then... Now, watch a minute of this version without me talking over it. I'll use the opposite cars to what I've shown already.
Easy right! Easy left! Easy right! Over jump! Hey left! Medium right! Easy right, easy left! Wow! Long, easy left! Easy left, maybe! Medium left! Medium right, checkpoint! Easy left, maybe! Wow! Easy left, maybe! Long medium left! Over jump! Medium right! Long medium left, maybe!
The PC version of the game released in 1997 in this somewhat fragile cardboard box thing, at least in the UK. This is my actual UK copy of the game. It's essentially a high resolution version of the Sega Saturn version. Before we get stuck into it, I thought I'd talk about the PC game's patch first. Here's what the game looked like when freshly installed from the CD. This original release didn't support MMX floating point processors, so it was a bit more sluggish. It also has noticeable breakup on the Celica's orange indicator lights. Note the small amount of white in each light. Now if I wipe across to the 2.10 patched version, you'll notice 2 things. Firstly, the lights are fixed, but the textures are actually a bit more stretched here, with more of a pixelated look. The game does run better though, extra controller support was added, and bugs were fixed, but it's interesting to note how, in some ways, the patch made it a little bit worse. The PC version also begins with the logo. The game is actually called Sega Rally Championship PC, as it came out in 1997. The Sega and Sega Sports logos flash up before similar rolling demos to the arcade version begin. These again show the desert stage, the forest stage, and the mountain stage. These aren't true one-to-one identical to the arcade, but they're pretty close. On modern PCs, the music might only play on the first desert sequence without fiddling with how the CD audio works by replacing it with digital music files. I've simply captured each intro separately here. One thing that is noticeable about the 16-bit colour mode of the PC version is that it can't handle smooth fades. The 256 colour pre-patched version did, but you get this pixelated dotty effect when the screen fades now instead. Before we start playing, and I actually like playing this on keyboard bizarrely, I thought I'd just mention that the patched version does have a bug, whereby the break and return to previous screen buttons are forgotten every time you load the game, so do remember to reset them using F5 each time you play. The PC version has a number of extra modes, and the ability to change car settings, but we'll just go with the regular championship mode. I'm using manual gears here. There's always a little burst of speed at the start of each track, but then the game settles down, at least for me. I've read some people have all sorts of issues with the speed of the game though. It is limited to just 30 frames per second, mind you, whereas the arcade runs at almost 60 FPS. The desert track plays out like the arcade, but the mountains at the end are badly positioned in the background sky texture and are barely visible. At least a helicopter is here. Switching to the Delta for the forest stage, you'll notice the large white and green background rock in this version, which is odd as it's actually modelled further on around the track. The little birds do also appear in this version, as does a little break-up and wobbly textures in the distance. The tunnel suffers particularly from textures not quite connecting. And here's the huge wobbly rock, before the descent down the mountainside, and across the line. Sticking with the Delta again for the mountain stage, this does look very nice, although the castle is now just background art and badly misplaced. The shorter draw depth becomes noticeable in the hairpin, with models snapping in and out. Overall, this is a nice looking recreation of this stage, although road textures do warp and break up at strong drift angles. Onto Lakeside, and this looks as gorgeous as the arcade original, and just as tricky. The flock of birds made it here too. My driving becomes legendarily bad at the lakeside itself though. I let the time run out so you can see the alternative relaxing credit sequence. The swans are even here. The name entry screen is present and correct too, as is... Game over, yeah! But what about if you win all the stages? Switching back to the Celica, you can see that you then get the celebration scene, and the credits with the replay of you driving through Lakeside. You can zoom the camera in and out with the gear shift controls here. This is followed by a second unskippable credit sequence, which seems a bit overkill until it gets to the car licensing details. These list the Celica GT4, Lancia Delta HF Integrale and the Lancia Stratos. That's right, winning the whole game unlocks a bonus car, which we'll test out in a moment. After entering your name, you can also watch a replay of your entire run, which has some of the most hilarious introductions to each stage you'll ever hear. Take it away.
Alright, let's watch your run one more time on the desert course. Well, you're gonna see your excellent run one more time. Cool breeze, birds and clouds. Relax and enjoy. Let's watch. The key to victory on this cool course is patience. But as you know, only patience is not enough to win. If you have to drive only one course for the rest of your life, this is the one. Is this heaven? Yeah. Sega Rally Championship heats you up. Come on, do it again.
Anyway, what about that bonus car? Well, when you choose a car, you can now press left or right on the Delta to choose the Stratos. This car does have a sound bug though, as the idling engine noise never plays.
3, 2, 1, go!
In real life, this car used the same V6 engine as Ferrari road cars of the era, which sounds pretty unique. However, here it sounds more like a load of angry bees. Handling wise, this car was rear wheel drive, and once the back steps out, it's very hard to get it back in line without either losing a load of speed or nearly spinning out. The trick is to take it gently and use the extra power on the straights. It's a dramatic looking little car though, but the butter in a saucepan handling will leave you frustrated quite often, particularly on the mountain track hairpins. Ouch! And double ouch. Even though I finished second, there's no extra stage for me. Now, as Sega Rally Championship was one of my favourite games, I decided to tinker with the game to make it better. I noticed the original engine sounds clip slightly as they loop. Listen to the Celica.
3, 2, 1.
And the Delta.
3, 2, 1.
So I edited both. Here's the updated Celica.
3, 2, 1.
And the updated Delta.
3, 2, 1.
I also updated the quality of the loading screens and the background skies, as I found the game could show higher resolution assets. I even repositioned the mountains on the desert stage, so you get to see them a little bit more. Here's the updated loading screen and the background on the forest stage. And here's the mountain stage loading screen and updated background. I tried moving the castle, but it didn't go well, so I left it where it was. If you'd like to try these updated assets, you can get them from the Vogon's website. The link is in the description under this video. Now here's a minute of the PC version without using my tweaked files.
Easy right. Easy left. Easy right. Over jump. Easy right. Stay left. Medium right. Easy right. Easy left. One. Medium right. Easy left. Easy left, baby. Medium left. Medium right. Next one. Easy left, baby. Easy left, baby. One. Medium left. Over jump. Medium right. One. Medium left, baby.
And now we come to the Direct 3D version. I was probably the first person to notice this version, as my friend at university happened to have an Orchid Righteous 3D Voodoo 1 3D effects card, which, if you look closely at the box art, states the D3D version of Sega Rally Championship is included. This turned out to be the only official release of this version, so I made a swift copy of the driver CD-ROM, which I've since shared. The first thing to note about this version is I guess it was compressed to fit on the driver disc, as this awfully slow loading bar appears every time something new loads. Either that or Sega wanted to protect the files for some reason. Eventually the intro demos begin, and you'll notice a few changes. The game now has full bilinear filtering on the textures, some light fogging in the distance, improved car window reflections, and a new background sky. The spray also looks a little less pixelated. Even the title page smoothly fades in now. It's a revelation. After another lengthy loading bar, the Sega logos appear, and then the forest stage. For some reason the music didn't trigger on anything except the first demo though. Some textures have taken a hit in quality, notably the front grille on the Delta and the Castrol logo on the rear of the Celica, yet many other textures look the same. The mountain stage is similarly enhanced in the same way, filtering and a new background. Where the Direct 3D version changes things up though, is if you leave the demos running. The second play of the desert stage now takes place in this lovely orange sunset, whilst the forest stage is now at night. And the mountain stage has this wonderfully thick fog effect. Much like Daytona USA Deluxe, which the same team will work on after this game, any stage can have these effects applied to them. I'll go into more detail about this shortly. The Direct 3D version has exactly the same options as the regular PC version, though it adds some rudimentary force feedback for some older controllers, as well as the ability to tweak the graphical effects in use. Let's start with the desert stage. The darker blue sky makes this maybe feel a little bit later in the day, but the bilinear filtering on the textures really makes things look nice. Once again though, you can hardly see the mountains at the end. The forest stage no longer shows the large white and green rock in the background. Here it feels much closer to the arcade with the extra filtering. The tunnel has less breakup in the roof, but some textures disappear a bit early, leaving momentary gaps. The mountain stage has lost the castle sadly, and the breakup on distant road polygons is possibly more noticeable here than in the original PC version of the game. Lakeside is very different. Due to the ability to change the environmental effects, this track is now run by default under blue skies instead of in the evening. I'm not sure the fog helps as much here, though you can switch it off, or increase or decrease it if you wish, by tweaking settings using F6. I finished the stage in second place. First, after a lot of loading bars, I see the wobbly wind sequence, though the background music didn't trigger here. After even more loading bars, and I've shortened them here believe it or not, you get the credits sequence with your car completing the lakeside stage. Then it's time for me to enter my name. You can then watch the same replays as the PC original version. If you do happen to finish the lakeside stage in first place, you get, apart from a lot of loading bars, the wind sequence, the lakeside credits, and then the long unskippable second credits. After entering my name, I managed to hear, although the CD audio plays over the top of it. This version uses a low-resolution audio file instead of a CD audio track, despite the CD version being on the disc. The Stratos plays just as per the PC version, which is pretty chaotically. But I managed to finish the lakeside stage, so you can see my guys half floating on the front of the car. Now one thing you might have noticed is that the window reflections are a bit jumpy. This is particularly noticeable when the camera pans around the car. Well, if you disable perspective correction under the F6 graphics menu, then they'll look much nicer. Unfortunately, the track textures then look like crazy zigzags instead. There are also some other lesser known things about the Direct3D port. If you quit the game and go into the game folder, you'll find a Rally INI file. If you open this in Notepad, there are a few things you can play with. The first being this line, D3D-BG equals enable. This uses newer 3D modelled background sky effects. If you switch it to D3D-BG equals disable, you can then try the game with 2D backgrounds instead. These are higher resolution, but animate a bit less realistically. Let's take a look. On the desert stage, the background now looks a bit more crisp, and as you travel around the track you can see the mountains a little bit more, especially at the end. The forest stage background reinstates the large white and green rock, which does look a bit out of place. But the much sharper background mountains on this section are actually kind of distracting now. The mountain stage background brings back the castle, and it's even slightly more accurately placed. I guess these backgrounds were high resolution replacements for the original game, but then replaced again by 3D modelled ones instead, as they tie into the movement of the camera a bit better. The lakeside background doesn't really look too different to the 3D background, but both have the horizon on the lake section a bit too far down, making the track feel like it's floating above the lake. Let's now look at the environmental effects. Here's the desert stage by day, and at sunset, which you can choose by holding gear shift down whilst loading a track, in fog, which you can select by holding right as a stage loads, and at night, which you can choose by holding left as a stage loads. Here's the forest track by day, at sunset, in fog, and at night. And the mountain track by day, sunset, fog, and night. Finally, here's lakeside by day, sunset, fog, and night. Now, one issue with the nighttime stages is that the light only comes from the camera position. This means the rival cars are essentially driving around with their headlights switched off, which seems a touch hazardous. But there is a secret tweak to improve this. If you exit the game and once again go into the Rally INI file in the game folder, look for the value car light equals off and change it to car light equals on. Save the update and load the game. Now you'll find that all the cars have headlights. This not only looks fantastic for the time it was made, but was an effect that was rare to see in games. I remember International Rally Championship by Magnetic Fields and Europress also having this feature, and that released around the same time that this Direct 3D version of Sega Rally appeared. The effect isn't perfect though. It's entirely dark as the race begins, and your car has no rear lights lit up. Also, the lighting can go a bit crazy around the hairpins of the mountain stage, but it's still a really cool feature, I think. So that's the Direct 3D version, some cool effects and a lot of loading bars. And here's a minute of this version in action.
Easy right. Easy left. Easy right. Over jump. Easy right. Take left. Medium right. Easy right. Easy left. One. Medium right. Easy left. Easy left, baby. Medium left. Medium right. Next one. Easy left, baby. Easy left, baby. One. Medium left. Over jump. Medium right. One. Medium left, baby.
Let's now compare each version at the pixel level. I won't use my upgraded backgrounds for the PC version, and I'll use the Direct 3D backgrounds for the Direct 3D version. First up, here's the arcade version at the start of the desert stage. Notice the big texture tear on the ground. This was actually present in the arcade original. Wiping across to the PC port, and you can see the car model has taken a hit, as has the draw depth, but most elements are present and correct. Wiping to the Direct 3D version and the camera is a little further forward, maybe they did this to counteract any breakup on the track. Otherwise everything is close to, or better than, the standard PC version, with the exception of the Castrol logo on the car bumper. You might also note I switched the D3D version to use miles per hour, another option that the Direct 3D version has. Here's the start of the forest stage. You can indeed see the big white and green rock on the horizon, but it's a true 3D object in the arcade that gets nearer as you drive towards it. Wiping to the PC version, and it looks like the background is many times larger than it should be. Everything else is fairly close to the arcade. The Direct 3D version is again a bit more zoomed in, and the fog does a good job here to add depth to the scene. Unlike the Celica, the logos on the Delta look largely identical to the standard PC version, just smoothly filtered now. The mountain track in the arcade is packed with detail. The PC version is almost one-to-one accurate with the scenery, though the road lines are a bit wobbly looking. The Direct 3D version tidies up almost everything, with the exception of some small gaps in the building roofs. Finally, here's Lakeside, with a lot of sponsor logos. Everything is a bit lower res in the PC version, and the textures near to the camera can warp terribly. The Direct 3D version tidies up the warp textures, but looks a bit odd in daytime. But wait, there's a hidden sunset version. Ah, that's better. Let's put all three versions head to head across each of the stages.
Easy left, easy right. Wow. Very long, easy right. Hairpin right, checkpoint. Okay, left. Medium right. Easy right, easy left. Oh. Easy left. Easy left. Easy right. Checkpoint. Take left. Medium right, maybe. One, easy left. Caution, hairpin right.
Sega Rally Championship is a very different game to Daytona USA, but both games were the peak of what could be achieved at the time. The arcade version is just so fun to play that make sure you give it a go if you come across a cabinet in the wild. The PC port is really very good despite running at just 30 frames per second. It's a shame the update patch warped the textures more than the original unpatched game, something I wasn't aware of until I took screenshots for this comparison. The Direct3D version is really interesting, but somewhat hamstrung by the incessant slow loading bars. It feels like it was a bit of a research project within Sega that finally got released in an odd way, rather than being an update patch for the original game. Although thanks to vets on the Vogon's website, you can now get an unofficial patch that turns the original game into the Direct3D version. You can find this in a link in the description below. It's certainly interesting to see the familiar tracks at sunset, in fog, and at night. Overall though, all versions play well, and the PC versions have a few more options, plus that awkward Stratos car. They also have two-player split screen, which I had a lot of fun with back at university on my old Pentium 100MHz PC. If you like this comparison of Sega Rally Championship, then give it a like, or subscribe, ring the bell, leave a comment, and join me next time for one of the best fighting games of all time.